My name is Madeline, and at 34 years old, I found myself scrolling through family vacation photos from Santorini that I wasn't invited to. There were my siblings laughing on whitewashed terraces, while I sat alone in my downtown apartment. This wasn't the first time. For years, I'd been mysteriously absent from family trip celebrations and milestones. But this time, instead of crying into my wine glass, I did something different. I made a $28,000 decision that would change everything forever. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, please like and subscribe to hear how I finally found my voice and gave the greatest gift to the people who truly deserved it. Growing up as the middle child of 5 siblings wasn't easy, but it became unbearable when I realized I wasn't just overlooked, I was deliberately excluded. My older brother Daniel went to Harvard Law School, and my younger twin sisters Harper and Haley both became doctors. Meanwhile, I pursued graphic design, which my parents Patricia and Robert dismissed as playing with computers. The pattern started early. When the twins turned 16, my parents threw them an elaborate party at the country club with 100 guests. When my 16th birthday came around 2 years earlier, we had cake at home because of budget issues. Strange how those budget issues disappeared for the twins. Daniel's college graduation was a family event. My parents flew the entire family to Boston, booked a luxury hotel, and celebrated for 3 days. When I graduated from state school with honors, they drove up reluctantly for the ceremony and left immediately after claiming Robert had an important golf game the next morning. But while my biological family treated me like an afterthought, two people never missed a moment of my life. Aunt Ruth, my mother's older sister, and her husband, Uncle George, lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment across town. They weren't wealthy. George worked for the Postal Service, and Ruth was a seamstress who worked from home. Yet they showed up for everything. Every summer when my siblings went to expensive camps, I stayed with Ruth and George. Those summers shaped who I became. Ruth taught me to cook from scratch to sew to find beauty in simple things. She'd say while kneading bread dough that love isn't about grand gestures, but about showing up consistently. George taught me about financial independence sitting at their small kitchen table with library books about investing. He opened my first savings account with $50 and taught me to read the business section of the newspaper. As I entered adulthood, the exclusions from my biological family became more sophisticated. There were group texts about Sunday dinners that I'd receive after everyone had already eaten. "Sorry, sweetheart, we thought you knew," my mother would say. Family milestone celebrations became events I learned about through social media. Look at Daniel's promotion party photos on Facebook. Surprise birthday dinners for the twins that were apparently planned in conversations I was never part of. The Thanksgiving incident 3 years ago should have been my wake-up call. I arrived at my parents' house at 2 o'clock, the time my mother told me dinner would be served. The house was quiet. I found them all in the living room, watching football plates pushed aside with remnants of turkey and stuffing. "Oh, honey, we thought you were working," my mother said without looking up from her phone. We started early. I sat there heating up leftovers in the microwave while my father Robert announced Daniel's latest promotion at his law firm. No one asked about my recent client win or the award I'd received for my design work. Harper and Haley chatted about their residencies, their voices carrying from the living room, while I ate alone at the kitchen counter. Ruth and George invited me to their apartment afterward. They'd saved me a plate, keeping it warm in the oven. George had bought my favorite dessert from the bakery across town, and Ruth had set the table with her good china. We ate together, and they asked about every detail of my work, celebrating my achievements as if they were their own. The resentment I felt toward my biological family grew with each exclusion, but I kept hoping things would change. Maybe if I achieved more, earned more, became more, they'd finally see me as worthy of inclusion. I threw myself into my work, building a successful freelance business, landing major clients, earning 6 figures by 32. None of it mattered to them. 2 years ago, my parents announced they were planning an intimate cruise for their 40th wedding anniversary. Finally, I thought a family celebration I'd be part of from the beginning. I offered to help plan it, research destinations, coordinate logistics. My mother responded to my texts with vague promises to include me in the planning. Weeks passed with no updates. When I pressed for details, Harper said Mom was handling everything and not to worry. Then my cousin Lisa accidentally mentioned how excited she was that the whole family was going on the cruise. When I asked for details, she got flustered and changed the subject. I did some investigating and discovered the truth. The booking was made for the exact number of family members minus one, me. When I confronted my mother, she didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. "We assumed you couldn't afford it, sweetheart. You know how expensive these things are, and with your freelance work being so unstable." The irony was breathtaking. I had just landed a contract with a major tech startup that would pay me more in 6 months than Daniel made in a year. My freelance work wasn't unstable, it was thriving. But they'd never bothered to ask about my finances or my life. I took that week off anyway and booked myself a solo trip to Costa Rica. I zip-lined through cloud forests, hiked to waterfalls, and watched sunsets from my private balcony. I posted nothing online, letting them wonder if I was hurt or angry. When I returned, the family group chat was flooded with cruise photos. Perfect family photo without anyone missing. Harper had captioned one group shot on the ship's deck. I stared at that caption for an hour. Without anyone missing. As if I had never existed at all. That's when I started seeing Dr. Santos, a therapist who specialized in family trauma. She helped me understand that this wasn't about me not being enough. This was about a family dynamic that needed a scapegoat and outsider to make everyone else feel more bonded. Every family system has its roles, she explained during one session. You've been assigned the role of the unnecessary one. She encouraged me to start a success journal documenting my achievements, not for my family's validation, but for my own recognition. As I filled pages with client wins, creative breakthroughs, and financial milestones, I began to see myself clearly for the first time. Meanwhile, life was throwing challenges at the two people who'd always seen me. Ruth was diagnosed with arthritis that made her beloved sewing increasingly painful. George was approaching retirement from the Postal Service, worried about making ends meet on a fixed income. Yet they never complained, never asked for help, just continued showing up for me with the same consistent love they'd always shown. I watched my family post about Daniel's engagement party, which I learned about after the fact through Instagram. The twins' joint birthday bash at an exclusive resort was another event I discovered through social media. Each exclusion was documented in my journal, not with self-pity, but with growing clarity. "They choose not to see me," I wrote one evening. And that's not about my worth. It's about their limitations. My business continued to thrive. Major brands sought my design work. My investment portfolio built on Uncle George's early lessons grew steadily. I was financially secure, emotionally healing, and professionally successful. Everything my family claimed to value, yet somehow still invisible to them. The moment of absolute clarity came during a meditation session. As I sat in silence, breathing deeply, a thought emerged fully formed. They will never choose me, but I can choose who deserves my love, time, and resources. The peace that followed that realization was profound. 6 months ago, my mother sent a text about a small family gathering for my father's 65th birthday. When I asked for details, she responded with, "We'll let you know," the same phrase she'd used countless times before. 3 weeks passed with no information. I should have known better than to wait. I was working late one evening when I accidentally saw Harper's Instagram story. She was at a luxury resort with our parents scouting venues for Dad's birthday weekend. The story showed planning binders, sample menus, and decoration options. This wasn't a small gathering. This was an elaborate celebration. I called my mother immediately. No answer. I texted both sisters. Harper finally responded the next day with a casual, "Oh, Mom said you were too busy with work to be involved in the planning." You know how you are with your deadlines. I hadn't mentioned any work conflicts. I hadn't said I was busy. They'd simply decided for me as they always did. But this time something else caught my attention. I realized I'd been muted in the family group chat for 2 months without knowing it. Messages were being exchanged, plans were being made, and I was deliberately kept in the dark. Using a friend's social media account, I did some investigating. That's when I discovered the family planning group chat that included everyone except me. Years of events had been coordinated there. Family reunions, holiday celebrations, birthday parties, all meticulously planned in a space I didn't even know existed. The resort weekend they were planning included spa treatments, a golf tournament, wine tastings, and private chef dinners. The budget listed was $15,000 from the family fund, the same fund I'd been contributing $300 to monthly for 5 years, never once benefiting from it. I called Daniel directly, hoping my older brother might finally give me a straight answer. His response was more brutal than any exclusion. "It's not personal, Mad. You just don't really fit the vibe we're going for. You're different from us, you know? Your lifestyle, your choices, your whole thing. It's easier this way. Your whole thing. My successful business, my independence, my choice to value people based on their character rather than their bank accounts. That was my whole thing that didn't fit their vibe." I hung up without responding and immediately stopped my automatic contribution to the family fund. Then I made a decision. I wouldn't attend my father's birthday. I wouldn't fight for an invitation to a table where I'd never be welcome. Instead, I'd create my own celebration. That weekend, while my family celebrated at their luxury resort, I drove to Ruth and George's apartment. Ruth was having a particularly bad arthritis day, her hands swollen and painful. George was trying to help her with her sewing projects, his thick fingers struggling with the delicate work. They were frustrated, but they smiled when they saw me at their door. We spent the weekend together ordering takeout, watching old movies, looking through photo albums of all the moments they'd captured of my life. Ruth had saved every article about my design awards, every screenshot of client testimonials, every photo from every event they'd attended. Saturday evening, as I helped Ruth with her exercises for her arthritis, she said something that changed everything. "You know, Madeline, George and I always wondered why your mother excluded you. I think she was jealous. You reminded her of who she could have been if she'd chosen differently. You have the independence. She gave up the career she never pursued, the courage she never found." George nodded from his recliner. "My family rejected me when I married your aunt. Said I wasn't ambitious enough. Wasn't the right cultural fit." 35 years later, Ruth and I have built a life full of love, while my siblings have money but no real connections. Family isn't about blood, Madeline. It's about choice. And we choose you every single day. That night I made a decision while looking at Ruth's swollen hands and George's tired eyes. These people who had chosen to love me for 34 years deserved more than takeout dinners and modest celebrations. They deserved the world. The research began that very night. I stayed up until 3 in the morning searching for the perfect destination to celebrate Ruth and George. It needed to be warm for Ruth's arthritis, accessible for their mobility needs, and luxurious enough to give them experiences they'd never dreamed of having. The Maldives kept appearing in my searches. Overwater villas with glass floors, warm, therapeutic waters, world-class spas, with treatments specifically for arthritis. I found a resort that specialized in accessible luxury, with butler service and accommodations designed for older travelers. The price for 10 days in a 2-bedroom villa, including all meals and activities, was $28,000. I looked at my bank account, my investment portfolio, my business projections. I could afford it. The question wasn't about money, it was about worth. Were Ruth and George worth $28,000? The answer was immediate and absolute. They were worth everything. The booking process was elaborate. First-class flights because Ruth had never turned left when boarding a plane, private airport transfers to minimize walking, a villa with a heated plunge pool for Ruth's morning exercises, spa treatments every day focusing on arthritis relief and circulation improvement, private chef service familiar with George's diabetes management needs. I hired a photographer to document everything professionally. This wasn't just a vacation. This was a love letter to the people who'd raised me in every way that mattered. I arranged underwater dining experiences, private yacht excursions, to see dolphins, sunset cruises with champagne service. For George, who'd mentioned once that he'd always wanted to learn underwater photography, I arranged private lessons with the resort's marine biologist. For Ruth, who loved fashion but never splurged on herself, I booked a session with a personal shopper to create a resort wardrobe. Telling them was almost as wonderful as planning it. I arrived at their apartment with champagne and told them we were celebrating their 45th wedding anniversary. Ruth immediately corrected me, saying it was only their 43rd. "I know," I said, "but you gave me 43 years of unconditional love and I'm rounding up." Ruth cried, saying it was too much, that I should save my money for my future. George was speechless, holding the itinerary with shaking hands. I knelt between their chairs, taking their hands in mine. You two saw me when I was invisible. You celebrated me when I felt worthless. You chose me every single day when my own family couldn't be bothered. This isn't too much. It's not nearly enough, but it's a start. The preparations were joyful. We went passport photo shopping together, Ruth giggling like a teenager at the official documentation of their upcoming adventure. The personal shopper visit was hilarious, with George trying on Hawaiian shirts and Ruth twirling in sundresses she would have never chosen for herself. I created a detailed itinerary considering their health needs, including rest periods, medication schedules, and backup plans for high-pain days. I booked comprehensive travel insurance and researched the nearest medical facilities. I learned basic Divehi phrases to surprise them and arranged for their favorite snacks to be stocked in the villa. A week before departure, I reached out to their old friends from the Postal Service and Sewing Circle collecting video messages for a surprise compilation. I also arranged for them to renew their vows on the beach, complete with a local celebrant and musicians. The night before our flight, as I packed my bags, the family group chat suddenly came alive. Photos from my father's birthday weekend flooded in. Professional family portraits where everyone wore coordinated outfits. Candid shots of golf games and spa days. Group dinners with raised champagne glasses. The caption on the final photo read, "The complete Robertson family celebrating 65 years. Complete. Without me, they were complete." I turned off my phone and finished packing. Tomorrow, I would begin celebrating the complete family I had chosen, and who had chosen me in return. The moment we arrived at the airport, Ruth and George transformed into excited children. George kept taking photos of everything from the priority check-in desk to the first-class lounge. Ruth held my hand tightly, tears streaming down her face as we were escorted to our seats on the plane. The flight attendant welcomed us to first class, and George whispered to me, "I've been flying for 40 years, and no one has ever welcomed me like I matter." "You always mattered," I told him. "The world just needs to catch up." The 14-hour flight was magical. Ruth discovered she could lie completely flat, easing her joint pain for the first time on a flight. George watched 3 movies, marveling at the noise-canceling headphones and the on-demand entertainment. When Ruth squeezed my hand during takeoff, she whispered, "You're our daughter in every way that matters, Madeline. Biology is just science. Love is the real truth." Landing in Mail, we were met by resort staff holding a sign with our names. The speedboat transfer to our resort was George's first time on the Indian Ocean. He stood at the bow like a ship's captain, the spray misting his face, looking younger than his 71 years. The villa reveal was everything I'd hoped for. 2 bedrooms suspended over crystal-clear water connected by a living area, with glass floor panels, showing the vibrant marine life below. Ruth and George stood frozen in the doorway, overwhelmed by the beauty. "This is ours for 10 days, Ruth asked in disbelief. "All ours," I confirmed. "Your home in paradise." That first evening, we had dinner on our private deck as the sun set over the ocean. George raised his glass of fresh juice and made a toast that I'll remember forever. To Madeline, who could have chosen bitterness but chose love instead. To the daughter who chose us back when we chose her. To family that's built on presence, not DNA. A routine quickly developed that honored both adventure and rest. Mornings began with adapted yoga on the deck, the instructor modifying poses for Ruth's arthritis. The warm sun and gentle movements visibly improved her flexibility day by day. George attended snorkeling lessons, overcoming his lifelong fear of deep water to discover the world beneath the surface. Afternoons were for spa treatments. Ruth's arthritis responded beautifully to the warm stone therapy and aquatic exercises. After just 3 days, she could close her fists completely for the first time in months. George joined her for couples massages, something they'd never experienced in 43 years of marriage. The underwater restaurant experience on day 4 was transformative. Surrounded by sharks' rays and schools of tropical fish, Ruth conquered her fear of being below sea level. As a nurse shark glided past our table, she reached for George's hand and said, "If you told me a year ago I'd be eating dinner underwater in the Maldives, I would have said you were dreaming." "Dreams are just plans waiting for the right moment," George replied, never taking his eyes off the marine life. Day 5 brought the dolphin excursion. Watching George's childhood dream materialize as dolphins swam alongside our yacht was worth every penny of the $28,000. He cried openly, not caring who saw, as a pod of spinners leaped around us. Ruth held him, and I held them both, three people who had found each other against all odds. The professional photographer captured it all. Not the staged perfection my biological family preferred, but real joy. Ruth laughing so hard at George's snorkeling stories that she had to sit down. George carrying Ruth's sandals so she could feel the sand between her toes. Me watching them with the kind of contentment I'd never felt at a family event. The vow renewal on day 7 exceeded my expectations. Resort staff had fallen in love with Ruth and George's story, going above and beyond to make it special. The beach was decorated with local flowers, musicians played traditional Maldivian songs, and other guests spontaneously joined our celebration. I officiated the ceremony, having gotten certified online specifically for this moment. As Ruth and George repeated their vows, amended to include promises about the future they still planned together, I spoke about chosen family. Some people believe family is about shared genes and obligatory connections, I said, as the sun set behind us. But Ruth and George taught me that family is about showing up when showing up is hard. It's about seeing someone when the world makes them invisible. It's about choosing love over convenience, presence over perfection. Today, we celebrate not just 43 years of marriage, but a lifetime of choosing to build family beyond blood. That evening, other resort guests joined our beach celebration. A couple from Germany shared their wine. A family from Japan taught us a traditional dance. The resort chef prepared a special anniversary cake. We were surrounded by strangers who felt like friends, people who understood that connection transcends language and culture. On day 8, I made the decision to share our joy with the world. I posted our first photo on social media, carefully timed for maximum visibility. It showed the three of us at sunset arms around each other, genuine smiles lighting our faces. The caption read simply, "Celebrating the parents who chose me." Within minutes, my professional network responded with hundreds of likes and comments. Colleagues who'd known me for years but never heard about Ruth and George were moved by the visible love in our photos. The second post showed Ruth and George dancing on the beach after their vow renewal. The third featured the cake-cutting ceremony with resort staff cheering in the background. Each photo was strategically posted to tell our story without words. The professional quality of the images, the obvious luxury of the location, the unmistakable joy in our faces. It all painted a picture that needed no explanation. By day 9, the posts had gained significant traction. Business contacts reached out privately, sharing their own stories of chosen family. New client inquiries flooded my inbox from people who wanted to work with someone who understood that relationships matter more than revenue. That night, as we watched stars from our deck, Ruth said something profound. "Madeline, you didn't just give us a vacation. You gave us proof that our love mattered. Every sacrifice we made, every moment we showed up, every time we chose you, when it would have been easier not to." It all led to this. Not to the Maldives, but to this feeling that we built something worth celebrating. George added his own wisdom. "Your mother and father have wealth, but look what they're missing. They're so busy maintaining their image that they forgot to build genuine connections. They have a family portrait, but not a family. We have something worth more than any trust fund." As I held their hands under the star-filled sky, I realized the $28,000 hadn't bought this moment. It had simply revealed what had always been there, love that didn't require DNA tests or family trees to validate its existence. The eruption began at midnight Maldives time, which was noon back home. My phone, which I'd kept on silent, suddenly lit up with notification after notification. The family group chat dormant during my absence exploded with messages. Harper's message came first. "Is this a joke? Where are you? The Maldives. Are you serious right now?" Haley followed immediately. $28,000. Have you lost your mind? That's insanely irresponsible. Daniel's message dripped with condescension. "This is incredibly petty and financially reckless, Madeline. I expected better from you." My mother tried calling repeatedly. When I didn't answer, she left a voicemail that perfectly captured her real feelings. How could you waste money like this on Ruth and George? We're your real family, Madeline. This is embarrassing and vindictive. Call me immediately. My father's text was brief but cutting, disappointed in your priorities and your need for attention. I screenshot everything, then continued posting photos. The fourth post showed George learning underwater photography captioned, "Living his dreams at 71." The fifth featured Ruth doing water aerobics, her face radiant with health captioned, "Healing happens when you're truly loved." The public response was overwhelming. Extended family members who hadn't spoken to me in years commented positively. Aunt Caroline, my father's sister, wrote, "Beautiful Patricia. Your daughter looks so happy. You must be so proud." Uncle Thomas added, "I didn't know Madeline had such a successful business." The Maldives. How wonderful cousins started asking publicly why they never saw me at family events anymore. "Where has Madeline been hiding?" one wrote. "We miss you at reunions." My mother was forced to respond publicly to save face. "We're so proud of our daughter and her success." She wrote each word, probably burning her fingers as she typed. But the private messages revealed the truth. Daniel sent a lengthy message about how I was embarrassing the family with this display of wealth and pettiness. Harper accused me of ruining everything and making Mom cry. Haley went further, suggesting I was taking advantage of elderly people for revenge. Finally, I decided to respond to the family group chat. I'd planned this moment carefully, knowing exactly what to say. I started by sharing a screenshot of the family planning group that had excluded me for years. Then I wrote, "I see you're upset about my vacation choices. Let me clarify something. In the past 5 years, I've contributed $32,000 to the family fund. I've never benefited from a single event planned with that money. Every cruise resort weekend celebration dinner, I was excluded from them all. I have the receipts and screenshots to prove it." I continued, "You assumed I couldn't afford things. You decided I was too busy. You determined I didn't fit the vibe. You made these choices without ever asking me. So I made my own choice. I chose to celebrate the people who chose me every single day for 34 years. Then I added the screenshot compilation showing every family event I'd been excluded, from every group photo I was missing, from every celebration I learned about after the fact. Ruth and George aren't my relatives taking advantage," I wrote. "They're the parents who showed up to every single event in my life. They're the ones who celebrated my successes when you couldn't be bothered to ask about them. They're the ones who saw value in me when you only saw an inconvenience. The $28,000 I spent on this trip, it's less than what I contributed to a family that never wanted me there. At least now my money went to people who actually want me in their lives." Ruth then did something unprecedented. She commented on my public post about the trip. My sweet aunt, who barely used social media, wrote, "Our daughter has given us the world, but we gave her only love. It turns out love was what mattered most. Thank you, Madeline, for choosing us back." Her comment went viral within my professional network. People shared it, adding their own stories of chosen families and biological disappointments. The narrative my mother had tried to control was spiraling beyond her reach. More private messages flooded in. Jennifer Daniels' fiancé reached out privately with a revelation. She wrote, "I've been wondering why I never met your sister until the engagement party planning. Daniel said you were always too busy. Now I see the truth. I'm honestly reconsidering joining a family that could do this to one of their own children." She continued, "The way they talk about you when you're not there versus how they're scrambling to save face publicly is very telling. I'm seeing a side of Daniel I don't like. Thank you for inadvertently showing me the truth." My mother attempted damage control in the extended family chat, claiming there had been misunderstandings, technical glitches with invitations, and miscommunications about dates. But people weren't buying it. Cousins remembered specifically asking where I was at events. Aunts recalled my mother making excuses for my absences. The family narrative that had held for years, the one where I was the difficult antisocial daughter who chose work over family, was crumbling in real time. That final night at the Maldives, I turned off my phone completely. Ruth, George, and I sat on our deck feet dangling over the water, watching fish swim through the illuminated ocean below. We didn't talk about the family drama. We talked about their plans to join a senior travel group inspired by this trip. We discussed George's newfound passion for photography. We planned Ruth's new exercise routine to maintain her improved mobility. As we packed the next morning, George pulled me aside. Madeline, what you did this week wasn't about revenge, was it? It was about justice. Not the kind that hurts others, but the kind that heals yourself. You chose to pour your resources into love rather than resentment. That's the greatest victory anyone could achieve. Ruth added her own perspective while folding her new sundresses. Your mother will never understand what she lost by pushing you away. But her loss was our infinite gain. We got a daughter who sees us, values us, and celebrates us. Braits. She got a family portrait. I know which one I'd choose. The journey home was bittersweet leaving paradise, but carrying its peace within us. Ruth and George glowed with health and happiness. The arthritis treatments had given Ruth months of relief. George's confidence from conquering his fear of water had transformed his posture. They looked younger, lighter, more alive. As we landed back home, my phone flooded with messages again. But this time, they weren't all from angry family members. There were dozens of messages from business contacts moved by our story. New client inquiries from companies wanting a designer who understood that relationships matter. Interview requests from podcasts about chosen family and resilience. The $28,000 investment had returned dividends I never expected. Not financial ones, though those would come, but emotional and professional rewards that validated every decision I'd made. 3 months have passed since the Maldives trip, and the ripple effects continue expanding in ways I never anticipated. The printed and framed photos from our journey fill Ruth and George's apartment with tangible memories of joy. Their friends at the senior center gather weekly to hear stories about swimming with dolphins and dining underwater, treating Ruth and George like celebrities. My business experienced unprecedented growth. The viral story of choosing love over bitterness resonated with countless entrepreneurs and creatives who felt unseen by their families. 3 major brands approached me for campaigns centered on authentic relationships and chosen family. My income doubled within 60 days of returning home. The family dynamics shifted dramatically, though not in the way my parents hoped. Daniel's wedding invitation arrived last month, my name carefully included. A handwritten note from Jennifer was tucked inside. Your presence is non-negotiable. I need at least one real family member there. She had seen through the facade and chosen truth over comfort. My mother requested a reconciliation lunch 6 weeks after our return. She looked older, more fragile, as she admitted things I never expected to hear. I was jealous of you, Madeline. You had the courage to build your own life. I married your father at 22 and never developed my own identity. Watching you thrive independently reminded me of every choice I didn't make. She continued with tears in her eyes. When Ruth chose you over maintaining peace with me, it felt like losing my sister all over again. But I see now that I lost her long before that. I lost her when I chose image over authenticity. I set clear boundaries during that lunch. Any relationship we have moving forward will be on my terms. No more family fund contributions without equal participation. No more assumptions about my availability or finances. No more exclusions disguised as misunderstandings. She agreed, though we both knew it would take years to rebuild what had been broken. Harper reached out individually, admitting she missed having a sister. She revealed that the twins had been coached from childhood to see me as competition rather than family. Mom always said you were too much like Ruth, too independent, too willing to challenge things. We were rewarded for excluding you. I'm not proud of it. We meet monthly for coffee, now slowly building something that might become sisterhood. It's tentative, fragile, but genuine in a way our childhood relationship never was. Haley remains distant, locked in the family narrative that preserves her comfort. Daniel's perspective shifted slightly after Jennifer's influence, but our relationship remains surface level. My father continues to view me as the difficult daughter who aired family business publicly, unable to see his role in creating the situation. But these biological relationships no longer define my worth or my world. My chosen family has expanded beyond Ruth and George. The Maldives photographer became a friend who visits monthly. The resort manager connected me with a network of entrepreneurs who prioritize relationships over revenue. The German couple we met sends postcards from their travels. Ruth's arthritis remains managed with the treatment protocol we discovered in the Maldives. She's returned to sewing, creating a line of comfort clothing for people with chronic pain. George's photography hobby blossomed into a small business documenting senior love stories. They're planning their next adventure, an Alaskan cruise they're booking with their own savings supplemented by what I insist on contributing, because that's what real families do. I established the Chosen Family Fund not for obligatory contributions, but for spontaneous celebrations. When my assistant mentioned never having a graduation party, we threw her one. When a client shared that his parents rejected him for his sexuality, I connected him with Ruth and George, who promptly adopted him into their ever-expanding circle of chosen family. Dr. Santos, my therapist, noted the profound transformation in our final sessions. You went from seeking approval to granting it to yourself. You transformed rejection into redirection. You chose to water the relationships that were already blooming, rather than trying to revive dead ones. The success journal I started in therapy has become a gratitude practice. Every entry includes Ruth and George, not for what they give me, but for what they taught me about the power of showing up consistently, loving unconditionally, and choosing family deliberately. Last week, we held Ruth and George's actual 45th anniversary party, not in the Maldives, but in their community center, surrounded by postal workers and seamstresses, neighbors and friends, chosen family from all walks of life. The German couple flew in as a surprise. Jennifer attended despite Daniel's discomfort. Even my mother made a brief appearance watching from the edges, as Ruth and George were celebrated by people who genuinely loved them. During the toast, I stood before a room of people who understood that family isn't about blood or obligation or maintaining appearances. These people knew that family is about presence and choice, and the daily decision to see each other fully. I raised my glass and spoke from my heart. 3 months ago, I spent $28,000 on a trip to the Maldives. People called it excessive, vindictive, financially irresponsible. But you can't put a price on proving to someone that their love mattered. You can't calculate the value of showing people who spent 43 years choosing you that they were worth choosing back. I looked directly at Ruth and George as I continued. Some people get family by birth and assume that's enough. Others of us build family through choice, and that makes it precious. Ruth and George didn't raise me because they had to. They raised me because they wanted to. They saw me when I was invisible, celebrated me when I felt worthless, and loved me when I was deemed unlovable. The $28,000 wasn't about luxury or revenge. It was about finally having the resources to give back a fraction of what they'd given me. It was about declaring publicly that love isn't measured in DNA but in presence. It was about choosing to celebrate the right relationships. The room erupted in applause, but the only approval that mattered came from Ruth's tearful smile and George's firm handshake that turned into a bear hug. That night, as I helped clean up the community center, Jennifer approached me with news. She and Daniel were in couples counseling, working through the toxic family patterns he'd inherited. She said, "You breaking free gave me permission to demand better. Your courage to choose different inspired me to expect different." My phone buzzed with a text from my mother, a simple message that held more honesty than she'd expressed in 34 years. I chose maintaining an image over knowing my daughter. I see now what that cost me. Ruth got to be your mother because she chose you over choosing sides. I'm sorry I didn't have her courage. I didn't respond immediately. Some wounds heal slowly, and forgiveness doesn't require forgetting. But I saved the message proof that even the deepest patterns can shift when someone chooses differently. As I drove Ruth and George home from their anniversary party, they held hands in the backseat like teenagers. Ruth spoke softly. "Madeline, that trip to the Maldives changed our lives, but not because of the luxury. It showed us that the love we poured into you wasn't just received, it was multiplied and returned. That's the best interest rate we could have asked for on our investment," George added with his characteristic wisdom. "Your biological family has their portraits and their coordinated outfits and their exclusive gatherings. But we have Tuesday dinners and emergency hugs, and someone who sees our worth beyond our bank account. I know which inheritance matters more." Pulling into their apartment complex, I helped them up the stairs, carrying leftover cake and congratulation cards. Their living room, once modest and plain, now showcased photos from the Maldives alongside decades of memories we'd built together. It looked like what it was, a museum of chosen love. As I prepared to leave, Ruth stopped me at the door. Next month marks 35 years since you first stayed with us for the summer. We want to go back to the beach where we taught you to swim, where you built your first sandcastle, where we became a family without knowing it. No Maldives required, George added quickly. Just the three of us, some sandwiches, and maybe a sunset. Sometimes the most expensive gifts are free. I hugged them both. These people who taught me that wealth isn't about money, but about the richness of genuine connection. The $28,000 I spent on the Maldives was nothing compared to the lifetime of unconditional love they'd invested in me. Family isn't about blood, I whispered into our group hug. It's about who shows up when you're invisible to everyone else. Thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. Ruth pulled back to look at my face, her arthritis forgotten in the moment. We didn't see you, sweetheart. You were never invisible. You were luminous. Your mother just taught everyone else to close their eyes. We simply kept ours open. What would you say to someone facing the same kind of family exclusion? How do we recognize the people who truly deserve our love and resources? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more about choosing love over obligation. Share this with someone who needs to hear that chosen family is real family. Thank you for being part of this journey. And remember, the people who truly see you are worth more than gold. May you find your Ruth and George, or better yet, may you be someone else's.